Greetings from Yorkshire. And I've just got three things to say, really. I'll look at what is the attitude, or what might be the attitude of the government, the opposition parties, and the devolved administrations, because a lot of waste policy is devolved, to the sorts of policy prescriptions that Shlomo has just outlined. I'll then just give two statistics which indicate how in many constituencies this is an issue. And finally, I'll look at some of the arguments of those who would say we should have more incinerator capacity and how to counter them. And I'll do that in 5 minutes flat. Now, firstly, the policy proposal of waste reduction targets that Shlomo mentioned. And there's a good deal of encouragement here. The Welsh government brought in such targets in 2011. The Scottish government has now got a reduction target of 11% on 2011 waste levels by 2025. And the UK government has said that as part of the legislation which is currently going through Parliament in the Environment Bill, they're very open to having such waste reduction targets. So we're pushing at an open door to some extent there. Now, secondly, moving on to the issue of tax and incineration tax that Shlomo mentioned. Now, this is something that Her Majesty's government has considered. When Philip Hammond was Chancellor of the Exchequer not too long ago, he had quite an extensive consultation exercise. And you can see there that that concluded in the budget of 2018 with the government saying the following, and it's in bold there: should wider policies not deliver the government's waste ambitions in the future, it will consider the introduction of a tax on the incineration of waste. So it remains an open question. And then moving on, the Welsh government, even more recently, in December of last year, said we will work with UK government to explore whether an incineration tax would be desirable as a further means to increase recycling. And the conclusion I would draw is that if there were to be an incineration tax at some time in the future to balance the landfill tax, it would be highly desirable that it was on a UK level, and therefore there was not an incentive to move waste around the country. Moving swiftly on to the third proposal for a moratorium on new incinerators, which was the subject of an EDM in the last Parliament. Now, there's very little direct comment from government or opposition on this, but there's some hints that ministers and shadow ministers are sympathetic to the idea that we have enough incineration capacity already. So, for example, Theresa Coffey, when she was a minister in the relevant department, commented, our assessment is that an additional residual waste energy capacity above that already planned to 2020 should not be needed if we achieve our recycling targets. Incineration by default is certainly not the answer that we want to promote. And then finally, on this, Rebecca Powell, the new Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, said very much the same. I won't read all out that comment because it very much echoes what Theresa said previously, that there is really no need in government's eyes, if recycling targets are met, for additional incinerator capacity. And finally, then, looking at the major opposition party, the Labour Party, in very recent months, they, for the first time, have come out with quite a bold statement that there remains the need to improve and expand recycling infrastructure to replace incineration. So there is, I think, across the political spectrum, some comments there which indicate that the proposals that have been made by UKWIN should get, hopefully, a hearing. There's a lot to be done in terms of lobbying, but certainly there's some good indications. And I promised you two statistics, Andrew, as to why this matters politically up and down the country. You did mention the ups and downs of political fortune, which we all have over the years. And if you look at, shall we say, the 83 most marginal Labour seats that the Labour Party will be defending at the next election, in 35 of them, incinerators are an issue. And if you turn it round and if you look at the 101 most marginal, largely Conservative, but some SNP seats that the Labour Party will be seeking to win, no less than 30 of them have incinerators as a major issue. So this is an issue that both on grounds of the environment and the economy, but also on political grounds, that all parties, I think, should keep a keen ear to the ground on. And then finally, I promised you just some very brief comments on the arguments of those who say we should have more incinerators. And how do they argue? Firstly, they mention jobs. Surely it's good because we'd have more jobs. But if you look at the number of people who work in the incinerator industry directly, it's about 1,500 at the moment nationwide. That's UK-wide. No one's suggesting that incinerators be phased out immediately, but shall we say, for the sake of argument, that all those that the waste that went to those incinerators was recycled, you would have 15,000 jobs, because it's much more labour intensive is recycling. And secondly, and Slomo referred to this in passing, some people say, well, if you have combined heat and power and you add that to incinerators, isn't that a good thing for the environment at least? Of course, it's better than not having combined heat and power with incinerators, but it still is very, very carbon intensive. And if we're serious about reducing emissions, it's not a long-term plan. And then the final argument that some people use is, don't we need to stop sending waste abroad? And isn't this an argument for new incinerators? And we, at the moment, export 2.5 million tonnes of waste each year. But as Slomo pointed out, this year alone, additional capacity of about 3 million tonnes of incineration capacity is either come on stream or about to come on stream. And so clearly there's no argument for more, even if we stop exporting waste to developing nations and indeed developed nations. And my final line would be, can we make a difference here over time on some of these policies? And I would look to Denmark as our example, a country that still uses incinerators more intensively than we have done in the United Kingdom, but has now decided to change. They have got a waste reduction target. They want to send 80% less plastic to incinerators by 2030. And they've also set a ceiling on incineration capacity, and they want to reduce that by 30% to by 2030. So that in effect is a moratorium. And my final line would be, today, just completely coincidentally, the incinerator that was proposed in my old constituency of Keighley, and which I fought, and my successor indeed, Robbie Moore, has fought, has today got the green light. So in Keighley and in many constituencies up and down the country, I think there'll be a lot of interest in the coming years about how all the political parties decide to respond to UKWIN's policy proposals. Thank you, Andrew.